Hello, everyone. I'm Johnny. Welcome to Decoded. Finland is located in northern Europe. It borders the Gulf of Bothnia. It has countless clear lakes. It enjoys the reputation of land of 1,000 lakes. It has a beautiful natural environment. In the southwest of the country, there is a small town called Ulvila. It is one of the oldest towns in Finnish history. It has a population of 14,000. The town is mostly made up of detached houses. Each house is not far from the next. People live at a slow pace. They live a leisurely and peaceful life. There lived a family in Ulvila. The husband, Jukka, was 51 years old. The wife, Anneli, was 10 years younger than her husband. The couple had 4 children. Their eldest daughter was 9. Their second son was 7. Their third daughter was 4. Their youngest daughter was 2. The family of 6 lived a peaceful life. Until one day in 2006, an incident happened to this family. It became one of the most controversial cases in Finnish judicial history. What exactly happened in the house? Let's go back in time to December 1st, 2006. December 1st, 2006. It was a Friday. In the early hours of the morning, Ulvila was completely silent. Only a few streetlights shone lonely in the cold night. The residents were all sound asleep. At 2:45 a.m., the local emergency response center received a call.
Hätäkeskus.
Täällä joku tappaa tulkaa nopeasti.
Mikä paikka? Rauhoitu. Mikä paikkakunta?
Ulvila.
Ulvila, joo.
Tähtisen tie 54.
Anteeksi, mikä?
Tähtisen tie
Joo.
54.
Onko tää omakotitalo?
On.
Joo, mitä siellä nyt tapahtuu?
Joku tuli ikkunasta sisään ja hakkaa puukolla mun viestä, niin muakin on hakattu.
Joku hakkaa puukolla.
Kyllä.
Kuka siellä hakkaa puukolla?
Heti.
Kuka siellä hakkaa puukolla? Tunneeko se sitä?
Ei se on pimeätä. Mä juoksin puhelimeen, kun mullakin tulee näköjään verta.
Joo, joo.
Ei nopeasti.
Joo, laita nap. Onko teillä monta siellä?
Meillä on myös 4 lasta täällä.
4 lasta?
Kyllä.
Jaha. Joo, sitä hetki. Mä menen hetkeksi pois linjoilta. Älä sulje puhelinta. Älä mene pois.
The call lasted over 4 minutes. The woman sounded distressed throughout the call. She claimed that an intruder had broken into her house. There seemed to be a man shouting and a child crying in the background. The operator realized the seriousness of the situation and immediately dispatched the police to the scene. 9 minutes later, the police arrived. The location was a house on Starlight Road in Ulvila. The layout of the house was as follows. Upon entering through the front door, on the left were the toilet and the study. They faced 2 secondary bedrooms. Further inside, on the right, were the dining room, kitchen, bathroom, and living room. Further in was the master bedroom with a fireplace. The master bedroom opened onto a covered patio. There was a glass door between the bedroom and the patio. In addition, there was a garage and a storage room. The officers entered the house. The scene was a mess. Things were scattered on the floor. It looked like a violent struggle had taken place. Further inside, they found an injured and unconscious woman in the living room. Upon examination, she had 2 stab wounds to her chest. She was then taken to the nearest hospital. The scene in the master bedroom was gruesome. A man was lying on the floor, lifeless. The police found 4 children in the 2 secondary bedrooms. They were unharmed. The 2 older children were frightened. The other 2 were still fast asleep in their bedrooms. After settling the children, the police began to investigate the house. They found a severely deformed dagger at the scene, a blood-stained spruce board, a log, and a black glove on the bed in the master bedroom. The log had bloodstains from an unknown male. There were footprints on the floor of the master bedroom and patio, about 30 centimeters long. The shoe size was estimated to be between 40 and 42. The glass door connecting the patio and the master bedroom was broken. There was a chair next to the door. It appeared that someone had broken the glass from the outside with the chair, and then entered the master bedroom to commit the crime. The victim's blood was found on the glass door frame, floor, and walls. On the victim, on the patio, and on the broken glass door, brown synthetic fibers were found. They may have been scraped off the intruder's clothing. Forensic results showed that the victim had suffered severe injuries to the head and face, caused by blunt force trauma. There were multiple wounds on the body. Judging by their shape and depth, they were caused by the dagger found at the scene. The fatal injury was a blunt force trauma to the head. One day after the incident, the woman who had been taken to the hospital was out of danger. Her name was Anneli. The victim was her husband, Jukka. Seeing the police arrive at her hospital room, Anneli, despite her weakness, anxiously asked about her husband's condition. When she learned that he had passed away, Anneli was devastated. With the comfort of the police, she slowly calmed down and tearfully recounted what had happened. She was a housewife and usually took care of the children at home. At 11 p.m. on November 30th, her husband returned home after work. 3 of their 4 children were already asleep. Only their 2-year-old daughter was still awake. So Anneli lay down next to her youngest daughter and softly lulled her to sleep. Soon she fell asleep. Then Anneli returned to her bedroom. After her husband finished washing up, they went to bed together. At 2:40 a.m., Anneli was awakened by a sudden loud noise. She felt scared and woke up her husband, who was sleeping next to her. They opened their eyes and listened for a moment. They realized it was the sound of breaking glass. It lasted about a minute. Just as they were about to get up and check, a large man suddenly flung open the patio glass door and rushed into their bedroom. The couple didn't have time to react before they were attacked. The bedroom was pitch black, with very poor visibility. They couldn't see the man's face, but in the faint moonlight, they could vaguely see that he was tall and strong, about 1.85 meters tall. He was wearing black clothes, and his face was covered by a mask. Her husband ran to the fireplace and grabbed a log to defend himself. But the intruder was tall and strong, and he was quickly knocked to the ground. Seeing this, Anneli rushed to help, but she was stabbed by the man. Then, she felt a sharp pain in her chest. Driven by a strong will to survive, she struggled to escape the bedroom. Reaching the living room, she desperately called out her children's names, urging them to run. She didn't dare go directly to the children's bedrooms, fearing the intruder would follow her. But the children seemed to be sleeping soundly. None of them heard her cries. Suddenly, Anneli remembered the phone in the kitchen. Enduring the pain in her chest, she went there and called the emergency services. Strangely, after the call connected, the intruder didn't continue to attack her. He seemed to stay in the bedroom. While she was on the phone with the operator, she heard her husband cry out in pain. Later, her eldest daughter was awakened by the noise. Confused, she hid in her room and cried. Anneli couldn't do anything at that point. She could only urge the operator to send someone quickly. After hanging up, she was exhausted. Finally, she collapsed on the floor in pain and gradually lost consciousness. When she woke up, she was in the hospital. Anneli told the police that she didn't know why the man had broken into her house. The intruder hadn't said a word, so she had no idea who he was. After the incident, news spread quickly. The police appealed to the public for clues. A nearby resident told the police that he had seen a red Volvo briefly stop in front of Jukka's house before the incident. But the person in the car hadn't gotten out, so he hadn't seen their face. because the car had stopped for only a short time. He couldn't remember the license plate number. There were no security cameras near Jukka's house at the time, so the police couldn't verify the information about the car. This lead couldn't be pursued. Jukka, the victim, was born in 1955. He was a social psychology professor and human resources trainer. He had limited mobility in his legs due to an accident in his youth. Sometimes he needed a cane to walk. He worked in Ulvila, 7 kilometers outside Pori, in the HR department of a copper factory. The factory employed many Ulvila residents. Some families had worked there for generations. The colleagues knew each other well and got along, but Jukka was an exception. He was unpopular at the factory because he was in charge of layoffs. It was a thankless job. Many people, after being laid off, resented Jukka, but Jukka didn't care. He felt he was just doing his job. He wasn't targeting anyone. In this way, 400 employees were laid off, and Jukka got into some trouble. Some people threatened him on his way to work, throwing stones at him, making faces. Someone, while he wasn't looking, scratched his car. They even spray-painted insults on his windows. This distressed Jukka. His mood plummeted. He gradually started thinking about quitting. In the following days, he continued working, while looking for new opportunities. But local jobs were scarce. To find something suitable, he had to look further afield. So he set his sights on Helsinki, 200 kilometers away. He planned to move his family there, after finding a new job. But he was killed before he could fulfill his wish. The police suspected Jukka had offended someone during the layoffs. Someone was deliberately seeking revenge. They went to the factory to check the records of laid-off employees, trying to find someone who fit the killer's profile. They interviewed several employees. Several admitted they had a bad impression of Jukka. They thought he was arrogant and looked down on everyone. After being laid off, they were resentful and did retaliate. But it was all harmless pranks. The police collected DNA from all the laid-off employees and compared it to the DNA extracted from the blood at the crime scene. But there were no matches. After further investigation, all the factory employees were cleared. Just when the police were at a loss, the Ulvila Emergency Response Center provided a clue. It turned out that when Anneli called them on the day of the incident, the entire call was recorded. There was a section of the recording that seemed to contain the killer's voice. The police analyzed the recording. Besides Jukka's cries, there was indeed another, deeper male voice. Although the voice was muffled, could be discerned that it wasn't Jukka. So they released the recording to the public, hoping for leads. After that, investigators collected nearly 700 DNA samples in Ulvila. But there were still no matches. As time passed, the case remained unsolved. The pressure on the police mounted, leading to a blunder in the investigation. 8 months after the incident, in July 2007, the police received an anonymous tip. The letter pointed to an actor named Tanner as a suspect. After receiving the tip, the police detained him for 7 days on reasonable suspicion. But they found no evidence against him and had to release him. Tanner was furious. He accused the police of abuse of power and wrongful detention. He lost work opportunities and suffered immense stress. He demanded compensation and eventually received 11,000 euros. After the Tanner incident, the case remained stagnant. The police then shifted their focus entirely. They turned their attention to Jukka's wife, Anneli. They reasoned that, since investigating so many people yielded nothing, they should try a different approach. They began a covert investigation of Anneli, using wiretaps and other methods. Anneli was born in 1965 in Kalina, a small town in southern Finland. At home, she was the eldest child, with a younger brother named Ari. The family enjoyed sailing. As the eldest daughter, she was doted on by her parents. Later, the family moved to Turku. Anneli attended Turku School of Economics. Majoring in economics, she hoped for a high-paying job. However, after graduating, she couldn't find satisfying work. She felt anxious and enrolled in an employment course. Jukka happened to be teaching social psychology there. Anneli was outgoing and participated actively in class. If she had questions, she would ask Jukka privately. Because of her excellent performance, after a while, she was hired by the Employment and Economic Development Office. She also became a teacher, her relationship with Jukka changing from teacher-student to colleagues. They worked in the same office. Although Jukka was 10 years older than Anneli, and already married, she fell in love with him. Anneli was attracted to Jukka's talent, and they got together. Actually, Anneli had a live-in boyfriend, named Jukka, but Anneli kept this a secret. Regarding Jukka, we'll come back to him later. Soon after, Anneli became pregnant with Jukka's child. Jukka was overjoyed, and quickly divorced his wife. Anneli also broke up with Jukka. After getting married, they moved to Ulvila. Anneli quit her job, and became a stay-at-home mom. Jukka found a stable job at the copper factory. His income was stable, and the family was happy. After Anneli gave birth to several children, she gained weight. She started dieting, and tried various weight loss methods. She created an online channel to share her weight loss and parenting experiences. She gained some followers, and became more confident. She even participated in a housewives' strike to advocate for allowances for stay-at-home mothers. After the incident, as time went on, Anneli gradually recovered from the grief and focused on raising her children. In April 2009, a man named Michaela entered Anneli's life. He pursued her relentlessly, often visiting her and playing with her 4 children. They got along very well. Michaela said he had been divorced for 5 years and had been searching for a lifelong partner. Until he met Anneli, he hadn't known what true love was. Anneli was swayed by his sweet words and accepted his advances. They planned to move in together soon. Just as she was ready to move on and start a new life, reality hit her hard. In September 2009, almost 3 years after the incident, the Pori District Court issued an arrest warrant. Anneli was arrested for the suspected murder of her husband. The reason given was reasonable suspicion. Anneli then learned a shocking truth. Michaela wasn't a divorced single man. He was an undercover police officer. He had been instructed to get close to Anneli, to extract the truth about Jukka's case. Anneli maintained her innocence and took a lie detector test, but she failed. Although lie detector results are not admissible in court, this reinforced the police's belief that she was the killer. Under constant pressure and leading questions, under continued pressure, Anneli broke down. She said, "Maybe I am the killer. There's no other explanation." Her words expressed confusion and helplessness. But the police took it as a confession, believing they had won, seeing it as an admission of guilt. For years after the incident, in April 2010, the case went to trial at the Satakunta District Court. The defendant, Anneli, was charged with murder. Anneli denied all charges. The prosecution argued that, based on the available evidence, there was a conflict between the defendant, Anneli, and the victim, Jukka. On the day of the incident, the two had an argument in the bedroom. The argument escalated, and they started throwing things at each other. Firewood from the fireplace and knives from the kitchen became their weapons. During the struggle, Jukka stabbed Anneli with a dagger, but not fatally. Anneli then seized the dagger and stabbed Jukka back, knocking him unconscious. Believing him to be dead, she began to stage the scene. She broke the patio glass door, put on gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, and tried to make it look like an intruder had broken in, successfully misleading the police. After doing this, she called the police, but during the call, Jukka woke up and started yelling. After ending the call, she hit Jukka in the head with a spruce board. The prosecution continued, arguing. There was no evidence the glass door was broken from the outside, and it could have been broken from the inside. Anneli had a cut on her forearm, which they suggested was caused by flying glass when she broke the door. Anneli had stated, the assailant wore black clothing, but brown synthetic fibers were found on the glass door, creating a contradiction. Furthermore, the victim's blood was found on Anneli's shirt sleeve. Anneli explained that she and her husband had a good relationship and rarely argued. It was late at night, and the children were asleep. They couldn't have been arguing in the middle of the night. The idea of staging the scene was absurd. Regarding the assailant's clothing color, it was dark, so it could have been mistaken for black. This was not unusual. The prosecution believed Anneli was too calm when speaking to the operator. This wasn't a normal reaction when describing an injured husband. There was no intruder. Anneli had staged the whole thing. She murdered her husband and then fabricated the scene. The prosecution claimed the spruce board found at the scene was the murder weapon. The defense argued it was an unrelated item. This point was disputed and couldn't be directly linked to the fatal injury. Therefore, the evidence was insufficient. The facts were unclear. As for motive, although there was no clear evidence of serious problems in Anneli's marriage, the prosecution pointed out the couple's financial difficulties and conflicts could have provided a motive. Specifically, Anneli and her husband were in a poor financial situation. After her husband's death, Anneli could have received some financial benefits. During the trial, Anneli underwent a psychiatric evaluation. The results showed no mental illness, and that she was criminally responsible. After a 6-month trial, the district court delivered its verdict. Anneli was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. After the trial, Anneli appealed the verdict. 8 months later, the appeal hearing began at the Vasa Court of Appeal. In court, Anneli's 14-year-old daughter testified. She slept alone in her bedroom, while her younger siblings slept in another room. On the night of the incident, she was awakened by her mother's screams. The room was dark. She was scared and kept crying. Although she didn't know what was happening outside, she knew a strange man was in the house. Therefore, she firmly believed her mother was innocent. The defense lawyer argued there was no evidence. Anneli had staged the crime scene. The source of the brown synthetic fibers on the glass door had not been determined. Therefore, the possibility of an intruder couldn't be ruled out. Only 9 minutes passed between Anneli hanging up the phone and the police arriving. In such a short time, it would be difficult to stage a crime scene to that extent. Moreover, Anneli herself was seriously injured and lost consciousness, not waking up until the next day. A witness reported seeing a red car parked near her house that day. Police dogs searched outside the house, stopping at a corner of a neighbor's house and exhibiting an unusual reaction. It may have detected a scent. although there was no further concrete evidence to directly link it to the case. It supported the intruder theory. Regarding the undercover police officer's claims about their dysfunctional family, Anneli stated, "She said those things out of grief and a need for comfort and support. After losing her husband, it wasn't the complete truth." After deliberation, the Court of Appeal delivered its verdict, overturning the district court's guilty verdict and acquitting Anneli of murder. She was released from custody. This result was a major reversal. After nearly 2 years of legal battles, Anneli was exhausted. After her release, she planned to live with her children and start a new life. But a new incident thrust her back into the spotlight. 1 month after her acquittal, in August 2011, Anneli's brother, Ari, went to the police and reported his sister for harming her children. He handed over recorded evidence to the police. During the previous trial, Anneli's 4 children, except for the eldest daughter, were temporarily in the care of Anneli's brother and his wife. The eldest daughter was placed elsewhere. Ari told the police his nephews had revealed some horrifying things. His sister had engaged in rituals with the 3 children and sacrificed dozens of small animals. His second nephew saw his mother practicing with a dagger and making something like a wooden shield to protect her clothes, presumably to avoid getting blood on them during the act. It seemed like some kind of practice. The second nephew also told Ari he was awakened by noises outside his bedroom in the early hours of the incident. He then heard the sound of a dagger falling from the table and what sounded like a tape recorder button being pressed. Ari speculated his sister might have murdered his brother-in-law before calling the police and recorded his screams. She then played the recording during the emergency call. The nephews also told him their mother and a strange man had molested them, making them very uncomfortable. A neighbor's child was also a victim. At first, Ari was skeptical, believing his sister wasn't capable of such acts. However, his nephew's detailed descriptions convinced him. He recorded the children's accounts in a video and submitted it to the police. Following this lead, the police questioned the 3 children staying with Ari. They confirmed the contents of the video were true. Based on the children's statements, the police quickly identified the man involved with their mother. He was Anneli's ex-boyfriend, Jukka. They had remained in contact after breaking up. Jukka had also visited Anneli's house several times. In September 2011, Jukka was arrested. He vehemently denied the accusations, claiming he had never done those things. Anneli stated she loved her children and cherished them. As a mother, she could never do such things to them. It was all a plot by her brother, Ari. The 2 siblings had a poor relationship since childhood. Ari was always driving a wedge between her and her parents. Now he was putting words in the children's mouths. His goal was to get her inheritance. 2012. Audio experts analyzed the phone recordings. They tried to determine if there was any tampering or pre-recorded audio. They found nothing unusual, but they couldn't determine the exact number of people on the call. The police then investigated the Anneli and Jukka incident. They questioned Anneli's eldest daughter and the neighbor's children. None of them knew anything about it. But Anneli's other 3 children insisted it happened. June 2012. The Southwest Finland District Court sentenced them to 7 and 10 years in prison, respectively, for assault and battery. For assault and battery. One piece of evidence was a drawing by Anneli. It was considered a ritualistic symbol. Anneli and Jukka appealed the verdict. 1 year later, the Court of Appeal upheld their convictions. Anneli's sentence was increased by 6 months, to 7 years and 6 months. Jukka's sentence remained unchanged. That year, the police revealed more details of the investigation. The unidentified blood found at the crime scene was actually from a police officer who accidentally cut his finger during the investigation. This news sparked accusations of police incompetence. Some even accused them of negligence, which they claimed led to the case remaining unsolved and increasingly complex. Despite the errors in the investigation, this proved there was no third party present at the time of the incident. As a side note, Finland's judicial system has 3 levels of courts. Cases begin in the district court. If the verdict is appealed, the second hearing takes place in the Court of Appeal. The final appeal goes to the Supreme Court. However, the Supreme Court generally doesn't re-examine the facts of a case, but focuses on the interpretation and application of the law. Not all appeals are accepted by the Supreme Court. Only cases with significant legal implications are selected. In Jukka's case, due to new evidence provided by the children, the Supreme Court accepted the appeal and ordered a retrial in the district court. This meant the entire judicial process had to start over. December 2013. Jukka's case was retried in the Satakunta District Court. The prosecution argued that no outsider entered the crime scene. Their second son's testimony about his mother making a wooden shield for practice suggested premeditation. She had prepared in advance. Footprints found at the scene were about 30 centimeters long, European shoe size 40 to 42, suggesting someone not very tall. But Anneli had claimed to have seen a tall man in black. Contradiction. After deliberation, the district court delivered its verdict. Anneli was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Anneli appealed the verdict. Over a year later, the second hearing took place in the Court of Appeal. The judge found that the police had failed to properly secure the crime scene, resulting in the presence of blood from an unrelated person. This raised the possibility of fabricated evidence. There was insufficient key evidence at the crime scene to rule out the presence of an intruder. The testimony of the defendant's second son lacked credibility and could have been coerced. No brown synthetic fibers were found on the defendant. There was no evidence she staged the incident. After deliberation, the Court of Appeal delivered its verdict. Anneli was acquitted of murder. However, she still had to serve the remainder of her 7-year and 6-month sentence. For the previous assault conviction, she remained in prison. June 2015. Both were released on parole. 1 year later, Anneli filed a lawsuit with the Southwest Finland District Court, seeking compensation for emotional distress. She stated that she had suffered emotional distress since 2009, for 7 years. Not only had the police failed to catch the killer, but she had been wrongly accused. She demanded compensation from the state. She also sued 50 police officers involved in Jukka's case. Anneli won the case and received €545,800 in compensation. Between 2021 and 2023, Anneli's children revealed to their defense lawyer that when they were sent to their uncle Ari's house, their uncle and aunt resented them. They were always hostile. Their aunt even suspected their mother had stolen their sailboat, and often yelled at them. They were only given porridge to eat. Then their uncle Ari started coercing them, coaching them to say their mother had murdered their father. He made up outlandish stories. Their mother never performed any rituals with them, or abused them with her ex-boyfriend. Their uncle constantly insinuated that their mother was involved in their father's death. They didn't understand his intentions at the time. They just repeated what he told them to say, because it meant they would get more food. After their mother went to prison, their uncle cut off all contact with the outside world. They lived in a repressive environment. If they revealed the truth to anyone, their uncle would become furious. Over time, they stopped mentioning it. Only after their mother's release did they dare to reveal their ordeal. Now they hope the court will overturn the verdicts against their mother and her ex-boyfriend. The court is currently processing the request to overturn the verdicts. Most of the information is not yet public. The truth remains to be investigated. Regarding Jukka's murder, although Anneli went through the entire judicial process and was ultimately acquitted, many people remain skeptical. There are many who believe her and many who don't. Neither side can convince the other. The controversy persists. Faced with public pressure, Anneli didn't shy away. She confronted it head-on. She published a book detailing her experience and gave numerous television interviews. On camera, she appeared sorrowful yet strong, moving many people. She strives to prove her innocence and find the real culprit. As for whether Anneli murdered her husband, perhaps only she knows.